What's going on, guys? JC Nita here again with a video, and I have a question for you. Do you think that $100,000 is enough to afford the American dream today in the US? Let me know in the comment section. $100,000 per year, can that afford the American dream in the US? Let's find out.
More than half of Americans say they would need at least $100,000 a year to be financially comfortable.
The benchmark of a six-figure salary used to be the gold standard income. It represented the tipping point of finally earning a disposable income and building a savings, spending based on your wants, not just your needs.
The American dream is what makes a middle-class lifestyle. You're able to pay your bills. You're able to put food on the table, put a roof over your family's head, and you have some additional savings.
Now, people making well over six figures are still living paycheck to paycheck. What used to symbolize financial freedom is now keeping people stressed about making ends meet.
26% say they would need more. A salary in the range of $100,000 to $149,000 per year would make them feel financially comfortable.
I think unfortunately what has happened is that wages haven't kept up with the cost of living by and large for the last 50 years or so. And so it becomes increasingly hard for many families to be able to attain that sort of middle-class lifestyle, that American dream.
How much you need to feel financially secure varies so much depending on not only your geographical location, but of course your lifestyle. It used to be that a six-figure salary was like the gold standard, but nowadays that may not be enough to make ends meet in certain parts of the country, especially like New York or San Francisco, where it costs so much more just to cover your daily expenses.
Here's why a $100,000 household income no longer buys the American dream.
Okay, so they brought up a good point. If you live in a coastal city, if you live in the West Coast or the East Coast or a major city anywhere in the US, then I'm going to go ahead and take a wild guess that $100,000 is not going to cut it. No, I'll take that back. It could cut it depending on where you're at and your situation, because they also mentioned lifestyle. And if you live a bare bones lifestyle, let's say, for example, you live in New York City and you have 6 roommates, you take the subway everywhere, you buy your groceries and cook very inexpensive food from a local grocery store somewhere. Maybe you can get by on $100,000 in New York City, or same thing in San Francisco. I know in San Francisco, there's a thing now where there are people renting pods, like little coffins with beds, concrete walls, and they're renting them for like $700 a pop per month. Now, before we get into the video, let's take a quick look to see where this $100,000 figure originated from and adjust that for inflation to see what it probably is today. Okay, so out of curiosity, I did a quick Google search and I typed in, when did $100,000 become the standard for the American dream? And according to Google, while there is not a definitive date, the idea of a $100,000 salary representing the American dream generally emerged in the latter half of the 20th century, particularly post-World War II. And it says, as the middle class expanded and suburban lifestyle became the typical aspiration, with a nice house, good education, and a comfortable standard of living being considered the ideal. However, due to inflation and rising cost of living, even $100,000 salary is now considered insufficient by many to achieve the full quote-unquote American dream in many regions today, like the video pointed out. So let's take a quick look and see what $100,000 in 1990 will be worth in today's dollar. So I have this inflation calculator from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, and let's see what we have here. So let's type in a date and let's get going, 1990. So as you can see here, $100,000 in the year 1990 in today's dollars is now $240,665.71. And that's in the last 34 years.
Go Banking Rates analyzed how much a family of 2 adults and 2 children would need in each state to own a home, a car, and a pet, as well as have an additional 20% of their income for savings and 30% for discretionary spending.
The core of what the American dream means is some amount of economic security, that you feel like you can get by and do a bit better. Maybe do better than your parents, maybe be able to afford a house, certainly be able to save for your children's future.
All 50 states require more than a $100,000 annual income, with 38 states needing more than $140,000. The most affordable states, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Kentucky, need between $109,000 and $117,000. The median income for a household of 4 people in each of those states in 2022 was between $71,000 and $87,000. Hawaii, California, and Massachusetts are the most expensive. Each requires an annual income of more than $240,000. The median income for a family of 4 in those 3 states in 2022 fell at least $94,000 short of what's required for the American dream. A different analysis from EPI found that in about 80% of the country, a family of 4 can afford their basic needs on less than $100,000 per year. Those include things such as housing, food, transportation, healthcare, childcare, taxes, and a few other basic necessities.
It doesn't take into account anything extra. It's really just putting food on the table, putting a roof over your head, getting health care for your family. And so you're not saving for a rainy day if something happens to somebody or if they lose their job. So there's no extra in there for retirement, for kids' college. Those are the kinds of things that many people want to save for. Those are the many things that people consider a part of the American dream.
Only about
The good news is, in about 80% of the country, $100,000 is enough to cover a family of 4. They didn't mention the dog. And by the way, I thought that the American dream was 2.5 kids. So I'm not sure how I went from 2.5 to 2. But anyways, they didn't mention the dog. But let's just say that the dog's included in that. That's good news. I mean, like they said, it's the bare minimum. It's healthcare, it's shelter, it's food, and transportation. There's no thing about vacation in there or saving for retirement or saving for your kids' education. But at least that covers it in 80% of the U.S. So hopefully, let's say that one spouse makes 60, the other spouse makes 60, one spouse makes 55, the other spouse makes 55. Okay, we have a few extra $1,000 per year to use towards those other things.
about 3% of those counties have a median income higher than the basic cost of living.
The idea behind the American dream hasn't really changed, even though lifestyles have. It used to be that you could get out of school, get a job, buy a home, and start a family, and now those milestones are harder to achieve.
All these clips that they're using in the video all seem from so long ago, like the 50s, the 60s, earliest the 90s. So that goes back to what I just showed you about the change in the value of money since this whole 6-figure thing came into play.
Even a high school degree, you're good to go. You can get a great job building cars or something and be right in the middle class off of a high school degree. But now, in order to get into the middle class, a high school degree is clearly not enough, right? Now, you gotta pay for college.
People are graduating with much larger student loan balances, and then it's harder to be on that same sort of career trajectory that would provide the stability that you maybe would have had a generation ago to save up for the down payment on a home.
Student loan debt reached an all-time high of $1.77 trillion in the first quarter of 2023. This can have a ripple effect, especially when entire generations are starting their adulthoods with thousands of dollars in debt.
So when we think about
I think that the 2 biggest wealth killers, the 2 biggest things holding people back from achieving that American dream today has to be student loan debt and car debt. Student loan debt and car debt. I know so many people personally that have either close to 6 figures or over 6 figures of student loan debt. Now, granted, this person I have in mind, or actually a couple people that I have in mind, they have advanced degrees. So that's one thing. And they make decent income, but they also have a whole bunch of other expenses. They're single, blah, blah, blah. But I also know people, anecdotally, personally in my life and not in my life, who have near or more than 6 figures in student loan debt for a bachelor's degree. And a lot of them aren't working in the fields that their degree is in. So that's number 1. Number 2 is car debt, which blows my mind because that's just ridiculous. I heard a quote one time, I forget the person who said it, but he was telling a story about how one of his mentors told him that there's no reason to buy an expensive car. I forget exactly what he said, I'm gonna butcher it, but something along the lines of you buy this nice expensive car and 70% of the time it's parked in the parking lot of the job that you don't like working at. I was like, man, that hit hard. And he said that alone just made him not want to buy an expensive car. And I was like, that's so true. A lot of people, they go to a job they don't really like, or they even hate. Some people like their jobs, but majority just kind of deal with them because they have to. And they buy this super expensive, nice car. Or maybe it's not even super expensive, just a entry level BMW or Mercedes or something. And it's just parked in the parking lot 90% of the time. I'm like, man, that is just crazy. So yeah, those 2 things I think are really, really making it difficult for people to achieve the American dream.
the kinds of investments you want to make for your children, the cost of college has gone up a lot faster than overall inflation. So trying to make those investments on a smaller and smaller paycheck compared to the cost of living can be very difficult and almost impossible. And so the kinds of debt that young people can rack up going to college gets larger and larger, and your ability to then make ends meet yourself, be able to buy a car, be able to move out of your parents' house, those things become much more difficult over time.
The American dream typically is people owning property and having children, but that's becoming largely inaccessible for many people. And even those who have attained these things are finding themselves managing every dollar coming in and out just to stay afloat. So that trade-off is underlying the new cost of the American dream.
Millennials and Gen Zers still want to buy homes despite feeling like they can't afford it. 62% of younger millennials and 63% of Gen Zers still say owning a home is part of the American dream. 66% of U.S. renters surveyed say rising prices leave them feeling hopeless about ever owning a home. 72% of respondents say they can't afford the down payment. 17% of all homebuyers said that saving for the down payment was the most difficult task in the buying process, and 52% said student loan debt delayed their ability to save. The typical first-time homebuyer in 2022 had a household income of $95,900. Nationally, a prospective homebuyer would need a nearly $110,000 salary to afford the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payments on a median price home. But
You know the crazy part about saving for down payments is that right now home prices are going up so quickly that by the time you save up the down payment you need for the house you were eyeing, the house is now increased by another 5-10%. Maybe not that much, 2, 3, 4, 5%. And so now you need to go back and save more. And you know what happens then? House price goes up more. It's wild. And like they mentioned here, most people aren't even making enough annually to even meet what they need to pay for that median price home.
the median household income in the United States in 2022 was a little under $75,000.
If you're born into a nice neighborhood in which your parents have lots of wealth and lots of income, your chances of doing well are vastly improved. And part of that's homeownership.
The dog is back.
Collectively, Americans owe $1.13 trillion on their credit cards.
Inflation, it's eroding people's purchasing power. It's reducing their ability to save for their future or invest in these long-term goals. So that loss of financial stability can create a sense of powerlessness and insecurity and contribute to feelings of uncertainty and vulnerability. It can really impact people's self-esteem, their resilience, their overall psychological health.
Economists have suggested that debt growth became a substitution for income growth. More than a quarter of Americans said that they are doom spending or spending money despite economic concerns.
There's also this idea that young adults are feeling more discouraged in their own financial standing. So in that way, they're less inclined to even save for long-term goals and more likely to just live in the moment. It's just sort of that mentality, like you only live once, I may not buy a home anyway, so let's take that trip or let's go to that event, whether it's a Taylor Swift concert or other big ticket item.
73% of Gen Zers say the current economy makes it difficult to set up long-term goals.
And it's not just
I think generations prior did the same thing, though. It's just the economy was different. Woodstock. Clearly, I'm not very versed on things that older generations did, but they went to parties, they took road trips, they backpacked across Europe, they did all these things. It's just that when they got back, they could afford a house. When they got back, they had a decent job that made enough to where they could afford that 2 kids and a dog. Now, for younger millennials and Gen Z, that's not the case. It's inflation. Things are a lot more expensive. So we're still doing the same things that our parents did and maybe their parents did, but it's just the economy is different.
About revenge spending. It's just about wanting to enjoy life and make the most of what you have, even if you can't necessarily buy that home or, you're not starting a family just yet and you really want to, feel good about yourself in the moment.
People are indulging to the extreme, and I think we often buy because we think that it's going to change our life or it's going to give us this emotion that we feel like we're missing. And it's like an endless trail of spending and constantly going to make us feel empty because we're externalizing something that we need to give to ourselves. I think that's a big issue with consumerism, and it's running rampant.
Social media has changed the conversation so much because there's just been this abundance of the ability to see these glamorous, glorified lifestyles. It's not only only celebrities that are presenting themselves this way, but even your own peers, which makes a lot of people feel like they're just not measuring up. They can't financially compete with what they're seeing online. It has left a lot of people, especially young adults, feeling very discouraged in their own financial standing. Even if they're doing okay, they just may not feel that way when they compare themselves to what they're seeing on social media.
The question is, are you?
Okay, let's add that to the list that I said earlier. So it's student loan debt, it's car debt, and it's social media. Because that's huge. Because social media then drives you to want to go and keep up with, I would say the Joneses, but it's not even the Joneses. They're not next door. Keep up with your friends all around the world or all around the US or wherever it is that you live, who are putting on this image of this amazing, fantastic life they're living when really, hey, maybe they are, but the chances are they're not really. And now you're looking at them trying to keep up with them and just holding yourself back. So I think that's a big one too, social media. I think if we could do something about social media, I mean, it's here to stay. And I mean, I use social media. I'm creating a video right now, which is technically social media, but it has goods and bads like everything else. But I do think that's a big key factor that our parents and their parents did not have to deal with.
Given kind of the luck of the birth lottery, are you able to have opportunities that are the same as those of people who may have been born into families that are in better circumstances than your own? The American dream is all about it shouldn't matter. The birth lottery shouldn't matter, right? So it's deeply relative.
There you have it. So like I said at the beginning of the video, guys, let me know what you think. Do you think that $100,000 is enough nowadays to afford the American dream? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to know what you have to say about it. And if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate you. If you feel so inclined to, please give the video a like. It really helps for the YouTube algorithm. And if you feel so inclined to, also subscribe. I really appreciate that as well. And until next time, make smart financial decisions.